5 years ago, you made a decision that looked exactly right. You had the income to support it. You had the track record to justify it. Every person you respected would have made the same call. And you did what the evidence said to do. The decision was not wrong. What was wrong was the unit you were given to evaluate it. In the fall of a particular year, it doesn't matter which one. Because this happens in every year, a couple in their late 30s receives news that changes the shape of their financial life. One of them has been promoted. Not a small step up, a real one. VP level. First time, at 39. The kind of title that takes a decade to earn and arrives with a number that reorders everything. Their combined income crosses $260,000. They have no children. They have been careful, deliberate savers for years. They have done, by any measure, the work required to get here. The promotion comes with a salary that is $40,000 higher than the year before. They sit down and do what responsible people do. They run the numbers. The mortgage on their current place is manageable. The new income creates real room. They have been deferring certain things, a larger apartment closer to the city, a car that doesn't require scheduled anxiety, a few services that would give back time on weekends. Now, for the first time, those things are within reach, without stress, so they make decisions. Reasonable ones. A new lease on a 2-bedroom they'd been eyeing for 2 years, an additional $1,100 a month. A car upgrade $680 a month in payments, higher insurance. A cleaning service, bi-weekly $280 a month. A meal kit subscription and a personal trainer, another $400 combined. They also increase their 401k contributions because that is the responsible thing to do. On a spreadsheet, it works. The raise absorbs the new expenses with room to spare. Every decision has a logic. Every number clears. What the spreadsheet doesn't have is a column for hours. The mechanism at work here doesn't have a dramatic name. It doesn't need one. Call it what it is. Time, cost, blindness. Here is the thing about units of measurement. They determine what you can see. A thermometer that reads only in Fahrenheit cannot tell you the boiling point of water in Celsius. It is not broken. It is just the wrong tool for the question you actually need to answer. Every financial tool you have ever been given, budgeting software, salary negotiation frameworks, net worth statements, benefits calculators reads in dollars. That is its only unit. And the question it cannot answer, the one that would have changed the calculation 5 years ago, is not how much does this cost. It is how much of your life does this cost. Those are different questions. They have different answers. And only one of them was ever on the table. Every financial system you have ever been given measures cost in dollars. That unit is so embedded in how we think about money that questioning it feels strange, almost pointless. Of course, cost is measured in dollars. What else would you measure it in? But dollars are not the scarce resource. Time is. A dollar can be replaced. An hour cannot. And yet, the entire architecture of personal finance gives you no tool to calculate how many hours a financial decision will cost you, not just to earn the money, but to maintain what the money buys, to manage what the money obligates, to recover from what the money demands. This gap was not designed in a single moment by a single institution. It evolved over a long period through the layering of systems that each had their own logic. Employers measure labor in hours but pay in dollars, which severs the visible link between time and compensation. When you receive a salary rather than an hourly wage, the connection between a specific hour of your life and its dollar value becomes abstract. Deliberately so, because an abstracted cost is easier to accept than a concrete one. A $500 monthly subscription feels different from the statement, "This costs you 11 hours of your working life every month." Both are true. Only one is how the charge is presented. Financial institutions measure wealth in balances, not in freedom from obligation. Your net worth statement shows what you own. It does not show how many hours per week you are required to work to maintain that ownership. Consumer culture measures status in acquisition, not in the absence of maintenance burden. An upgrade is always framed as addition, more space, more capability, more comfort. The hours required to clean the larger space, to manage the more capable system, to sustain the higher comfort level, are not part of the advertisement. None of these systems individually decided to hide the time cost, but together they produce a person who makes every significant financial decision in the wrong unit and has no mechanism to correct for it, because the correction tool was never included in the package. Who benefits from this? Anyone whose revenue depends on your continued participation at the current income level. The landlord whose rent requires your continued employment. The financial institution whose mortgage requires your continued employment. The subscription economy, which has precisely modeled the threshold at which a monthly charge feels insignificant enough not to cancel, but significant enough to matter in aggregate. The employer who benefits from a workforce that needs next year's salary to maintain this year's lifestyle. Each of these entities has a structural interest in you continuing to measure cost in dollars, because in dollars, their charges look manageable. Measured in hours of your life, the picture changes. Here's the one-line mechanism. You were never given a tool to see what you were spending, so you kept spending the thing that mattered most. Go back to that couple. 12 months after the promotion, a different kind of accounting becomes possible, not because anything went wrong, but because enough time has passed to see what actually changed. His hours expanded, not dramatically, at first maybe 4 or 5 extra per week, but VP level work has a different texture. There are decisions that follow you home. There are Sundays that are not entirely Sundays. There are mornings that start earlier than they used to. The title came with income, and it came with an implicit claim on time that was never stated in the offer letter. She works in a different field, stable hours, no change in her role. But the new apartment is farther from her office. A decision they made for his commute, which improved. Hers lengthened by 22 minutes each way, 44 minutes a day, nearly 4 hours a week. She didn't calculate this before they signed the lease because nobody suggested she should. The cleaning service gave back 2 hours on alternate Saturdays. The car gave back the anxiety of the old one. The meal kit gave back some of the decision fatigue around dinner. These were real returns. They are not imaginary, but if someone had sat down and run the full calculation in hours, not dollars, the picture would have looked different. His extra hours at work. Conservatively, 4 per week. 50 weeks a year. 200 hours. Her commute extension. 4 hours per week. 200 hours. The new apartment requires more management maintenance requests, a longer setup, a building with more logistics. Add 20 hours annually, conservatively. Against this, the cleaning service returned perhaps 40 hours a year. The meal kit, 30. The net time position after the promotion, if measured honestly, roughly 350 hours spent, 70 hours returned. A net cost of 280 hours annually, 54 minutes a day, every day. That the new income level costs them beyond what the old one did. That is not a catastrophe. It is not even unusual. It is the normal arithmetic of a lifestyle upgrade measured in the wrong unit. In dollars, the raise was unambiguous progress. In hours, it was a trade that cost more than it returned. They are not in crisis. Nothing collapsed. By every conventional metric, they are more successful than they were before the promotion. but in the currency that actually matters. In the hours they are free from financial obligation, free from maintenance burden, free to choose differently. They are not measurably richer than they were the year before. That is the quiet consequence of time cost blindness. Not disaster, just a life that requires more of you than it used to, for a number on a screen that is larger than it used to be, while the actual distance between you and financial pressure stays approximately the same. The forensic question, the one that belongs to this kind of accounting, is not what did they do wrong. It is what information was available at the time, and which of it did they use. The commute extension was calculable before they signed the lease. The address of the new apartment was known. Her office address was known. The math was 12 minutes with traffic on a Tuesday, which becomes 22 minutes consistently, which becomes 4 hours a week, which becomes 200 hours a year. That number existed before they signed. Nobody ran it, not because they were careless, because nobody framed the lease decision as a time decision. It was framed as a dollar decision, and in dollars, the rent was within range. The hours his role would expand were not knowable with precision. But the category was knowable. VP-level positions at companies of that size, in that industry, carry a documented pattern of expanded availability expectations. That information was available. It was not part of the offer letter conversation. It was not part of any conversation because the offer letter is a dollar document. Time does not appear on it. This is not blame. It is inventory. The information existed. The frame, to use it, did not. Scale this forward. Not across the population, across a single life. 10 years from now, if the pattern holds, the income will be higher. The obligations will scale with it. The lifestyle will have adjusted upward in ways that each felt incremental and reasonable, and the hours required to sustain it will have grown in the same quiet, unannounced way that the apartment and the car and the services did, each one defensible, each one adding to a structure that needs more of you every year. Think about how this compounds across a career. At 35, the baseline is set by one income level. At 40, a raise adjusts the baseline upward. At 45, the larger mortgage, the higher insurance, the private school tuition if children arrived, each of these reset the floor. The floor is the number you must earn just to stay where you are, not to get ahead, just to maintain. And every time the floor rises, the hours required to clear it rise with it. Consider what a pivot looks like at 45 when the floor has been rising for a decade. Someone wants to move from a corporate role paying $180,000 to an independent consulting arrangement that, in its first 2 years, would realistically generate $110,000. The gap is $70,000. On its face, that is the number to solve. But the real number is different. The mortgage at this income level, the car payments, the school costs, the insurance structure built around employer coverage, the lifestyle baseline that accumulated across 10 years of raises together, they require something close to $155,000 annually just to hold the current position. The $110,000 doesn't cover the floor. The pivot is not a $70,000 problem. It is a $45,000 structural gap that would require either liquidating assets, taking on debt, or cutting the baseline, each of which has its own time cost. The floor was built one reasonable decision at a time. Each decision had a dollar logic. None of them had a pivot logic. And by the time the pivot becomes desirable, the floor has made it expensive in a way that is very difficult to reverse quickly. The insidious quality of this pattern is that it feels like progress the entire time it is happening. Each adjustment is a response to something real, a genuine opportunity, a legitimate need, a reasonable preference. There is no single moment where a bad decision is made. There is only a series of good decisions, each one slightly raising the floor. each one slightly narrowing the gap between income and obligation, until the gap is so thin that any disruption, a job change, a health event, a market shift immediately becomes a crisis. Not because the income is low, but because the structure leaves no room. This is not a warning about spending. It is an observation about measurement. Every year, millions of financially responsible people make decisions that are correct in dollars and costly in hours, and they have no tool to see the difference. They feel it in the Sunday anxiety, in the calendar that never clears, in the sense that more income has not produced more freedom. But they cannot locate the source because they are looking at the wrong column. The system that produces this outcome does not need to be malicious to be effective. It only needs to be consistent, and it is. Every raise is framed in dollars. Every purchase is priced in dollars. Every financial goal is measured in dollars. The unit is everywhere. The thing the unit hides is everywhere too, but it has no column, no app, no advisor conversation built around it, so it accumulates invisibly year after year, decision by decision, until the feeling of being stuck becomes the background texture of a life that, on paper, looks like it should feel free. Here is the reframe. You were not making bad decisions. You were making decisions in the only unit you were given. The question was never whether you could afford it in dollars. It was whether you could afford it in hours, and that question was never on the table. The people who move differently are not more disciplined. They are not earning dramatically more. What they have is a second column. They run every significant financial decision through two calculations. What does this cost in dollars? And what does this cost in hours to earn, to maintain, to manage, to eventually exit? When those two columns diverge sharply, they pause. When a raise arrives with obligations that consume most of what the raise produces in time, not money, they name that before they spend it. This is not a framework for refusing upgrades. It is a frame for seeing trades clearly before agreeing to them. The trade was always there. The column that showed it was not. The people who've mapped this tend to ask a different question than the one the system gives them. Not how much can I earn, but how little do I need to sustain something worth sustaining? That is a question the dollar column cannot answer. It requires the other one. The distance you were looking for was never ahead of you. It was always the space between what you owe and what you earn. What's one decision you made 5 years ago that felt like financial progress and that you now measure differently? The people who've mapped this tend to build their lives around a different question. Not how much can I earn, but how little do I need to sustain something worth sustaining?